Hello, and welcome to our second part of today's lab, where we're going to look at 5 billion named vessels, and we're going to do some different activities just to keep things fresh. I'm going to have you do pinning, so this part will be pinning. Other parts, I'll have you look at my rotating models. I'll have you just do mouse over activities. So I'm going to hopefully not do it all the same. It's very tempting just to have you do all pinning because I really love this website. So in part one, we are going to do the thoracic cavity. Now you noticed I kept the whole thing on. And that's because I want these blood vessels in the arms and neck as well. So I was playing around with skeletal, artery level 2, venous level 1. And I'm going to zoom in on the thoracic cavity. So I'm playing around with it. I decided the sternum is just in the way. So I'm going to hide the sternum. And I'm going to fade these ribs. So the first few ribs I'm going to fade. And I'm going to fade the clavicle as well. The clavicle is very important. So I went to the fade and the hide. You could probably hide the ribs too, and then I'm going to tilt it a little bit so I could see the vessels coming out. And pick an angle that works for you. Don't just go by what my angle is. So that angle seems to work for me. We'll see in a couple minutes when I finish. So we have our heart. There's our apex. We'll be pointing into the lung right there. There's our cute little auricles. I love the auricles. This would be the ventricles. Anterior interventricular sulcus. Right atrioventricular sulcus. So we learned all that last week. So we have the inferior vena cava right there. Superior vena cava, excuse me. And we have two veins coming into it that I want you to label. We have the left brachiocephalic vein and the right brachiocephalic vein. As the name implies, brachio, arm, cephalic, head, because we have blood coming down from the jugular, and it is going to go into the heart. Now we also have blood coming from the arm. Here's the subclavian vein. And they merge to become the brachiocephalic vein. It's about 2 inches long. So go to tools, go to labels, and label them. I'm not going to label them because all my labels are going to get in the way. So while we're at it, let's label the subclavian veins. So here is one of the subclavian veins. It gets its name because, oh look, it's going under the clavicle. There's our other subclavian vein. And we're going to label our internal jugular veins. So this is the internal jugular vein. It's coming from the jugular foramen. Here's our other internal jugular vein. This is the external jugular vein. It's coming from the back of the head. So label those as well. So we have our jugular veins. There is no jugular artery. Most of the arteries you learn, it has a corresponding artery. We have our subclavians, one subclavian, two subclavian, and we have our two brachiocephalic veins, and they go into the superior vena cava. And there's the inferior vena cava. You could tag that if you want. We're now going to do the arteries, and I'm going to remove the veins just so it looks easier. I keep it on. I'm just removing it so you could see better. So here is the arch of our aorta right there. And we have this one big vessel coming off. That is the brachiocephalic artery or brachiocephalic trunk. I learned artery. I'm going to use artery. That's the brachiocephalic artery, and it branches. We have one branch. Oh, look, it goes under the clavicle. What should we call that? That is going to be the right subclavian artery. So you need to tag the right subclavian artery. And then we have the carotid artery. This is actually the common carotid artery. It is going to go. It actually splits right here. And we're going to have the external carotid artery. That's going to give rise to the temporal artery. It's going to give rise here to the facial artery. What do you think that one's called? Yep, it's the occipital artery. Now we have the internal carotid right there. And this is your physiology teachers are going to talk about. That's the carotid bodies. You have a bunch of sensory receptors in there. So this is the internal carotid. So this is the carotid artery on the right side. So the brachiocephalic artery, there's only one, branches into the right subclavian and right carotid. And while we're here, I want to point out another vessel. You don't have to label this one. This is the vertebral artery. So here's the vertebral artery. It's going to go up, it's going to go in, and it actually sneaks through the foramen magnum here, goes up the brainstem, and then it hooks up with the, oops, that's not a, it hooks up with that, the carotid. So, oh wait, this isn't symmetrical, is it? On this side, we have the common carotid on the left side, so the left common carotid. What a surprise, it breaks into the internal common carotid and the external common carotid. The external common carotid, facial, third time's a charm, temporal, and occipital. We have then the subclavian. So this is the subclavian artery on the left side. It is going to have the vertebral artery coming off of it, and it is going to go to the arms. So that's what I want you to label for the pinning. So again, for all the pinning, you go to labels. It's going to label it for you. So let's do left carotid, right carotid, brachiocephalic, and so subclavian on that side, subclavian, oopsie, that's a clavicle. Subclavian on this side. And let's put the veins back. Let's put the veins back again. And then I want the jugulars. You know when the clown's attacking, you're supposed to go for the jugulars, right? Just making sure. So we have the external jugular. We have the brachiocephalics. We have the subclavian. Can I get the subclavian in there? That's a clavicle again. Apparently I really like the clavicle. So go, let me do that. Nope, that's too far over the axillary. So you might have to remove that clavicle to get the subclavian in there. So that's what I want you to label on this. And then you are going to go to a website. You are going to do the mouse over activities. You are then going to go to your lab book. You're going to fill in these. I hope you figured out, do this while you're doing the mouse over activities. It makes it go faster. And then in this space right here that I've given you exactly 2 centimeters for, I want to tell me, did I send you to my website or did I send you to Dr. Carpenter's website? Dun, dun, dun. So that's part 1. Thank you. Let me rephrase that. That is part 2, activity 1.